now the introducer, and I'm excited to introduce Abe Sorberg. He's a student at the University of Colorado. He studies geography, although he is from that town of Second City television fame, Chicago. And he brings with him that fantastic sense of humor that Chicago has. He is a center, did I mention this? He's a Center of the American West student. He's studying geography, and he also serves on our Humor Initiative Committee. So our committee, we realized that we could be a little bit compromised sometimes on our committees by sort of inching the age factor up a little bit. So we've been purposefully integrating students and recent graduates because sometimes they have the finger on the pulse of what's funny in the world, maybe something new that's funny in the world. So everybody, please give a warm round of applause for Abe Sorberg.
Thanks, I'm Abe. Those are high expectations, so I'm sorry about what's about to happen here. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, all right. So when I was actually first asked to introduce Patty for this Fool's Enterprise talk, I'll be honest with you, I think I was a little offended because every time I've seen, some type of award show like the Oscars or the Grammys, they bring out like a really kind of great actor to introduce the other great actors, and I didn't know I was known as that much of a fool. I didn't know I had that reputation amassed already. But then I talked to Patty about it, and she's actually been an official fool for 40 years and a proud fool for her entire life. And contrary to what I had originally believed, being a fool is something you can really be proud of. Back in the Middle Ages, at times like kings and queens, the fool was an appointed position. Sorry, I've tried. The fool was an appointed position. It was someone of high moral character and sort of excellent observation abilities who would take an outside look from the inside and report back to the king or queen about what they saw. The fool was not afraid to say what needed to be said, to question what needed to be questioned, to point out the outrageous elements of society that people had come to accept as normal. For many, humor is a tool used to cope, connect, and in some cases even hide. But for the fool, humor, like nothing else, has the ability to catalyze conversation and initiate change. This is the power of the fool. Unfortunately, today we live in a world with very few fools with the capital F, the kind that I'm talking about. Jon Stewart, his contemporaries, are they modern fools? I think no, and me and Patty talked about this earlier today, actually. The fool sits in this position where they're on the inside and they get privy to all the insider information, but then they inform the inside, but they view from the outside, which gives them a very luxury that Jon Stewart just doesn't have. The fool must also, therefore, report directly to the top. A fool's observations are made to the heads of the system, not only for the enjoyment of those around the system, although that's definitely an asset of the fool. This makes being a fool quite rare and also quite risky. And while there may be hundreds of closet fools, it takes a brave fool to report what they see. And Patty Limerick is one of the bravest. Patty is probably the only open fool on campus, despite the many wise professors we have today. For her entire life, Patty has fought for the fool. Unfortunately for us, she has documents to show it. She first applied to be an official fool back as a graduate student in Yale. Recognizing how seriously academia took itself, she launched a campaign to add a new and desperately needed voice to the university system. Shortly afterward, Patty became the official fool of Harvard University. In founding the Center of the American West, Patty made sure that the mission statement included, "A dose of good humor is essential to constructive public discussion." She's an inspiration to aspiring fools everywhere. But the fool is not the only medieval position that has seemingly disappeared. Thanks to advances in technology, there seems to be no more need for a town crier. We can now display information or get information out without just kind of shouting it. Until today. While I'm not so qualified to introduce Patty, I do find myself exceptionally qualified to be the town crier before you today. So hear ye, a presidential proclamation from the University of Colorado President Bruce D. Benson, dated April 1st, 2015. Whereas, on this auspicious first day of April 2015, when fools of every stripe are feted and recognized, and whereas the University of Colorado, that has no faculty members step forward to act foolish in capacity, at least in the past 6 hours, instead confining their activities to world-class teaching and research, and whereas the contempt of the official fool dates to the medieval days, dates to the medieval days, which is entirely in keeping with the guild system that guides faculty affairs to this day. And whereas Professor Patricia Nelson Limerick, who in name and deed exemplifies the truest and best qualities of fools everywhere, And whereas Professor Limerick has previous experience preparing for her this August designation by serving as official fool at little-known institutions like Harvard and Yale. Whereas, in the interests of advancing town-gown relationships in Boulder, Professor Limerick may also recognize and be known by all as Fool of the Hill. And whereas, the success of the Center of the American West Humor Initiative will require a title of sufficient gravity, and its opposite comedy, for the leader to advance the study of such a serious topic. And whereas, a former member of the board of the Center of the American West, President Bruce D. Benson, will take every opportunity to distance himself from such a foolish adventure as the Humor Initiative. And whereas, this being the first and likely the only proclamation of the presidency of Bruce D. Benson, in making such a lofty designation a critical decision, he deemed it best to consult no advisors, form no committee, appoint no task force, seek no approval from the Board of Regents, or to consider policies, practices, procedures, propriety, or precedent. Now, therefore be resolved that Professor Patty Limerick is hereby named official fool of the University of Colorado, with all the rights, responsibilities, reservations, roasting, raucousness, riposte, and revelry the designation entails. I'm very pleased to introduce Professor Patty Limerick, the official fool of the University of Colorado Boulder.
An interesting thing we discovered in anticipation of this evening is that my appointment had expired. So, emergency requests were made of the president, and he came through very wonderfully on that. So I am now, and you'll notice in that proclamation, not a word about the limit of the term. So I take it to be like the Supreme Court or something. So here is a photo you've seen in our advertisements. And the motto of Harvard is veritas, or truth. And this isn't my favorite Latin term, but stultus is the term for the fool. And this is the occasion where President Bach and I were first. I met President Bach, but I had not met him in this particular shape. And I would like to say, for heaven's sake, look at this. One little rip. One tiny rib. This photograph is from 1981 or 2, and what wonderful, these petrochemicals. No wonder we just use fossil fuels carefully. They just last and last. So here we are. This is a personal history, though there is, I think, a lot of larger social implications and cultural and political and who knows what implications in this. It pleases me that this concept, which is personal, also has a lot of cachet and a lot of notice in the world, so I was very pleased. It was really kind of at the height of my full visibility that Charles Schulz put this book out, and I didn't really know if Charles Schulz was thinking of me, but actually, I did meet Charles Schulz when I was in college, so there is a tiny chance that Charles Schulz I met ages ago. It's a comfort to me that Sammy Davis Jr. took my cause seriously and sang memorably, "What kind of fool am I?" As in fact, the songs of the late 1960s, like 1950s and early 1960s are full of references to fools and being a fool and so on. But this one, this song does raise the question, what kind of fool am I? And only note the headline in this thing. I just thought this is from a letter to the editor a while ago from me. But the fool has a clarification on what kind of fool am I. Not that. That. Oh, what a crime. Oh, I guess it's, the First Amendment, this horrible creature is protected under the First Amendment, I guess. So I tended to file a grievance. I vote this is not what this. No responsibility. This would never have happened if the fool had been in charge. I'm sorry about this, but that is not it. And I will say, we'll get a little bit into this as we go through some of these stories. There's no, there's nothing to be done. When you go out as a fool, some people will look despairing and frightened and flee you. And sometimes if you chase them, that makes them very unhappy. And it's hurtful as the fool because you're no threat to anybody. The notion of being threatened by a fool, how could you get up in the morning if you're fearful of just even a fool scared you? But I think it's the minds and the bozos that create that problem. So that's where that comes from. I could run. In fact, I could barely look at that. Let's get it off the screen. So it's gone. These are my predecessors, the traditional medieval fool, the folks who were appointed by kings and queens and aristocrats, who had not just the license, but the requirement to speak openly and honestly, and who could do that with a little more cheer than others in those hierarchical societies, because it really was frowned on to punish a fool, to cut the head off a fool, to do things that were punitive to the fool. So, and in fact, the idea, which seems like a very solid idea, was that if you did not have a person in the fool's role, the kingdom was at risk. You were storing up bad luck in a scary way. So discharging the bad luck, these creatures were really important. They were female as well as male, though the great scholar, we'll get to her in a moment, of the fool in history, was writing the book was published in 1934, so she uses only the male gender, but she does tell the story of she tells the story of quite a number of female fools in the medieval era, one of whom was a French fool who was ill-tempered, and the understanding in this court was that you should never give that fool any alcohol to drink, because she could get so angry that she would physically attack people. So not only were there female fools, but some of them we would not. Well, no wonder people learned to run from these things like this. So anyway, this is my tradition. And of course, the greatest of our inspirations, our role models, is King Lear's fool. You'll remember Lear was nobody you really wanted to spend any time with. He had become a horror to himself as well as to everyone around him. But who stuck by him? Well, Kent, that one guy too, but this one, the fool. Look at the fool. Here's this mad old character, and he's a desperate fellow, and the fool is still giving it a good try. Is still trying to stay in relationship and try to get through the storm. The term still is out there, but it's gone out of my control and understanding. If you Google traditional fool, this image comes up. Not the first one, but like maybe the 7th or 8th one, and you think, hamburgers with sunglasses? The traditional fool. So to some degree, the culture has moved on. There's aspects of the meaning of the traditional fool. Don't ask me. Don't ask me. I have no idea. I do not see these as rivals. I do not see them necessarily as comrades, but they're a lot more attractive, really, than the bosom character. So here's my mentor. Here is where this all got started. This is a very interesting man, Bill Carpenter. He's a very smart man. He's still with us. He trained with Hal Holbrook of the Mark Twain impersonations, and he created a thing called the Midway Caravan. And in New Haven, Connecticut, where I was a graduate student, he had a workshop on fools and clowns. I was in graduate school at Yale. I had very bad writer's block and really deeply into teaching. But that made the summers torment for me, because the students, I don't know why they would do that, but they went off for the summer. And that really left me in a pinch. They weren't sensitive to my needs at that point. So I had to find a way to get through the summers, because I was really not writing my dissertation, which would be the obvious thing to do, but not tenable. So I looked in the New Haven newspaper, the underground newspaper, on one occasion, just at the start of the summer, to find something to do, and I found a fool's workshop taught by Bill Carpenter. I took that fool's workshop. He is a complicated, pretty magic person. What he didn't put in the ad was that the constituency was an interestingly mixed one. He had one group that was ongoing, and we'll get to that group in a minute, but every once in a while he would open up his workshops, and over time we understood that to be my friend Melinda, who took that first workshop with me, that was the normal neurotics version of the Fool's Workshop. It was about makeup and costumes and hats and so on, but it was really about the meaning of the fool in traditional culture and how that could still have vitality and value and help people navigate. So, Bill, very cool person. This is Arthur Murray. You're not getting it, are you? You looked like a lively and quick-witted group, and now you're not understanding why I'm showing you a picture of, when wouldn't that be fun to dance? Look at that going on the side, especially looks like, well, anyway, so the Arthur Murray Dance Studios have been quite prosperous as a business. Arthur Murray's daughter, and I think she was very upfront about this, Phyllis Miller, had long-term mental health problems, and she was quite wealthy. So when she was in her middle years, she took some of the Arthur Miller Dance Studio inheritance and created a psychiatric outpatients club in New Haven. And that's the base, that was Bill Carpenter's base for his ongoing Fool and Clown work. So if you took your entry-level Normal Neurotics Fools workshop and you wanted to stay involved, then you went to the Fellowship Club, Arthur Miller's daughter's creation, and that had an ongoing Fools group. Most of the people were struggling very hard in life, in and out of psychiatric hospitals, and so you had to make an interesting transition to say, okay, I would like to stay with this group. The transition did not last very long. You would go out with a group of people who really were struggling and spend the first 2 or 3 outings hoping that the public could tell the difference between you and your comrades. And then after 2 or 3 of those outings, you just thought, who cares about that distinction? So that was a wonderful experience. Well, the point of all this is, I don't know what the point is. Can anyone possibly identify the point of all this? But so it's so wonderful to be indebted to Arthur Murray's dance studio. Well, okay, so these were where we would go to the New Haven Green frequently in clown makeup as fools, and we would put on St. George and the Dragon plays, and we would dance with little children and had many adventures at that. This is the New Haven Green. And then I kept my life separate. I did the Fools projects out on the New Haven Green at festivals, and there's no denying, I had a very strong track of sentiment where I thought, please don't let any of my professors come to this festival. To confirm for them that I was a fool was really... So at that point, there were many things I did not know at that point, but I thought, well, they would never just find the dissertation acceptable if I ever wrote one, which didn't seem to be happening, but if I were to write a dissertation, then the professors would say, well, she is a known fool. I've seen her on the screen, but I can't possibly accept that dissertation. So I was nervous. But then, in steps and stages, I started crossing the line. This is Sterling Library at Yale, and really in the front area here, there's a staircase that comes out from downstairs. There's a sort of across-campus lounge area. It might have been remodeled by now. But I would go gradually, as I got my courage up, I would take my clown stuff in. I would walk in as a normally looking graduate student, whatever that might be. What would that be? There's a comical notion itself. But so then I would go down into the basement, go into the restroom, put on my clown makeup in the restroom, and then put on my clown clothes, and then come up those stairs and enter the world here coming up those stairs as the fool. And nervous, but the first few times coming up those stairs, if I ran into a distinguished Yale professor, the pattern was so repetitively that professor would look momentarily childlike and cute. Just, wow, I didn't know I was going to the circus today, but I went to the circus. And so there would just be a moment of unbelievably cute and appealing cheer, and then usually within a second or two that would shut down, and well, this doesn't seem like a way anyone should be appearing in a student library. But if you paid really close attention, you would see that split second, and it was very beautiful, and it would last. So, man, I read a book. I wasn't writing any such thing, but I was certainly reading them. And I came upon, I think Bill Carpenter brought this to my attention, Enid Welsford's book, The Fool, his social and literary history, was published in 1934. She was, I think, a British lady scholar, sort of maybe more literary, certainly very erudite. And she wrote a book about the fool. I believe I was the only person who took it as a how-to book. I just read it, and I still own that little notebook I had where I copied the passages that I thought, oh yeah, I could do that, or that makes sense. So, Dr. Wellsford, and it's the cutest thing in the world, I keep using the word cute, and I hate the word cute, because that is why I hate these hats, because they're cute, and I don't want to go there, but Enid Wellsford, it's such a nice thing, she wrote this wonderful book, it's totally out of print, it's like $105 to get a copy of it now, but it is, at the very opening page, it says, dedication to my mother. That's so sweet. That's good. So anyway, she is good, and she writes aphoristically in parts of that book. So I just want to give you one example of what to me was such a, okay, I see that. I can live that. The fool, this is Miss Professor Wellsford, I know she was Professor Dr. Wellsford, I think. The fool knows the truth because he, and she does say he throughout, because he is a social outcast, and spectators see more of the game. So, such an interesting notion that the person actually on the field playing is not going to see, which just gives such a dynamic as to why kings and queens wanted a fool, and why, in fact, we made a mistake when in democracy, representative democracy, we thought, well, we won't need that anymore. But we'll hear a little bit more from Dr. Wellsford later on, but this book was unbelievably helpful to me. Oops. Now this represents a huge moment of transition. Rose Stone was the department secretary in our graduate program, and she knew I spoke quietly and privately and in a lowered voice to Rose Stone in the office about doing these things as a fool. So as the holiday party approached, it was 1978, she said, I've been doing this fool thing for 2 years, very hidden, split life. Rose Stone said, why don't you come as the fool to the department holiday party? Doesn't seem like a good idea. I don't think that came up in Dr. Wellsford's book. I don't think that was in there. So how do I handle that? So she, but she was so wonderful. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. I thought she would not do this to me if she thought she was putting me in jeopardy. So I will do it. And it was very hard. I brought my makeup to the Hall of Graduate Studies. I went into the restroom to put on my costume and to put the makeup on. I didn't put it on. I came out. I went into the party thinking, I just don't think I can do this. And Rose Stone looked up as I walked in, and I didn't have makeup on. I didn't have colorful clothes. And she looked so sad and disappointed. So I thought, okay. So I said, oh, hi, Rose. I just wanted to say hi before I go in. And I acted as if I was going to. So I went in. My hand was shaking. I had to hold this hand in order to put the makeup on. And then again, when I walked into that room, people turned and looked, and I got to see like maybe 54 versions of that moment of delight before the, but what was unbelievably lucky was that the young faculty had brought small children. I'm not sure that I was ever particularly entertaining to groups of small children, but I had balloons. I happened to be wearing some balloons tied to these ribbons, so I just seized on that. And so this sort of occasion is what I sailed under that flag. I am here to entertain the children. I said, let's just go with that. Let's not talk about Dr. Wellsford here. Let's just keep these dear little children. And heaven knows the kids were in that. That was really great. That's the sort of funny. There's the hat that I was trying to wear, which I, of course, hate. But anyway, so then this custom evolved, which is a very delightful custom. Here's two friends from high school who had come to visit me and decided they would like to join me on what I had crafted by that point as the Fool's Tour, that you go out in makeup and you tour the campus and you have a question that you ask. And you carry your notebook and you write feverishly in your notebook. We're a little bit of a parody of a Margaret Mead ethnographer kind of like that, but we'd have a question and we'd go around, and students, sometimes Yale students would join me in this as well. It was quite fun. So that's the origins of the Fool's Tour that became Fool's Reports here. Anyway, so there we are in New Haven where I live, and we're about to go out on a Fool's Tour. And see, we take notes very rigorously, and we compare notes because that's what we do. This particular Fool's Tour, we went to the Yale campus, and we went we chatted with a bunch of people we ran into, but then we thought, I wonder where all the rest of the fools are. So we went to the Yale Police Department, and we went in and they said, well, what can we do for you? And we said, we are looking for fools on campus. And they said, well, that can't be much of a problem. And then they got going. I mean, this is what's very nice about the whole project is how other people take possession of it and go with it. So they said, that's really all we do here at this office is protect fools. That's what we do, protect fools. But we pushed them to find out more about where we could find a concentration of fools. And then there were two guys who said, okay, you just want to see where all the fools on campus go? Yeah, we do. That's what we're looking for. They said, okay, go to the Yale Art Gallery and go to the Modern Art section. You'll find them first. So, now we get to the, these are not, I have the text here, these are just to show that these documents exist, that I did not make these stories up. So I shall be filling in the text, so don't trouble yourself about whether you can read this. Oh no, they're going, see, they flee the fool. They're just really, the fear hits people, and they, if you get scared, breathe deeply, turn to your neighbor for help. So, okay, so here we have my first effort to get into the official world. There's a complicated story as to why I finally started this, but in September, I still have writer's block, I'm still not writing my dissertation, but I wrote the president of Yale, Bart Giamatti, who was a Renaissance literature scholar, so he was totally up to speed, and I asked him to appoint me the official Yale fool, or jester. I said, the official Yale fool or jester. I wrote him the letter, and this is his response. Dear Ms. Nelson, thank you for your letter of September 12th. I appreciate your continued interest in assuming the title of official university jester. Though I have no reason to doubt your many skills in this regard, this is a responsibility I am particularly loath to give up. So I will continue to carry the two jobs. Thanks for offering me. With every good wish, sincerely, Bart Giamatti. I knew him, I've run into him a number of times, but this was our first official correspondence. So I noticed where he says that he will continue to be the jester. He uses the word jester, he does not use the word fool. Okay. So then, a little time passes, a month and a half or so, and I think, actually the campus newspaper did a story, and they wrote of the rivalry between President Giamatti and me and said that he wanted to hold on to the office. And they did a little cartoon of President Giamatti in a jester's costume, and I thought, that's not fair. He never does that. I do that all the time. He's never out in a jester's costume. So I wrote him, November 9, 1979, Dear President Giamatti, I am writing to announce my intention to assume the title of Yale Fool. Today, in a pleasant afternoon spent introducing myself to members of the Yale community, I found it increasingly uncomfortable to say, I am trying to be the Yale Fool. As far as I can tell, judging by all the available evidence, I am the Yale Fool. I dress the part, I wear the appropriate colors. At least once a week I am publicly available in the capacity of fool. I have no direct visible rivals. That's a little, okay, President, there you go. Personally and philosophically, and it's actually amazing to me to look at these documents to see how straightforward I am about some of this stuff. Anyway, each of days. Personally and philosophically, I'm in a perfect fool's position, balanced between affection for the university and despair over it. I mean, I remember I do not have my PhD here. I'm still just if you are interested in retaining the role of university jester, I respect your claim. Our quarrel over the office is, I think, unnecessary. Our talents in the field of folly are more complementary than conflicting. Moreover, in the 20th century, kings or their equivalent no longer appoint fools. It is the often painful right of Americans to make fools of themselves. With this letter, I become the self-appointed Yale Fool, accepting both the honorable Shakespearean and Erasmian elements to the word and its pejorative contemporary meanings as well. That's, I think, the distinction with Jon Stewart and others who are very funny and doing a wonderful service, but do not actually step forward and fully embrace the what you think I'm a fool aspects of this. If I do not hear from you, I will make the usual fool's assumption that silence means consent. Patricia Nelson, Yale Fool. So, then thing happened, and I obviously played a role in this, but I have no memory of it. A stringer for the New York Times got this correspondence. It's hard for me to think that the president decided that would be a good idea. So New York Times, November 21st, 1979. Remember, I've been struggling. I started graduate school 72. I'm struggling with writer's block. I'm getting nowhere in my dissertation. So here's the notes on people. It's a living department. I should say, picked up instantly by Associated Press and by International Herald Tribune, so worldwide in second grade. Considering, this is how it begins, considering the large number of people who could fill such a role, it's surprising that no one before thought of creating a position in American business and education for an official fool. It fell to Patricia Nelson, a Yale graduate student, to suggest that she be appointed the first university fool, and she emphasized her qualifications in a letter to Yale's president, A. Bartlett Giamatti. She heads a group of Yale clowns known as Fools Enterprise. Ms. Nelson said, adding, "I have been in graduate school here since 1972, and I am only now coming close to finishing my dissertation. This alone should qualify me." And what's disturbing about that is that it's a lot. I actually was not. Bad moment for a fool to. So that appeared. I ran into Bart Giamatti not long after that, and he said that he had gotten, it goes on, the article goes on to say that President Giamatti will not give up the job, that he will remain, and sadly, I have now switched the terms on him, so the New York Times article says that he will hold on to the job and be both fool and president, which is really different from jester, maker of jest, but fool and president. And so I ran into President Giamatti, who said that he had gotten more letters of concern from well-established alumni about why he would want to be known as a fool and would choose. So he said he got more letters on that than he got on apartheid and disinvestment from South Africa. That, I don't know how much I could recommend this, but to have this thing, this on-record statement about my writer's block, which I had tried to conceal, which I had fudged, I had lied, I'd done everything I could to deceive people. But here I am saying, I've been here since 1972, I'm getting nowhere. Well, I'm not quite as honest as that, but that to me was instant liberation, knowing that that was everywhere on the planet. And I had friends who were having breakfast in Paris and reading the paper, and but notice that you have writer's block. So, really a relief. And almost within a month of that, a little bit more than a month, I started writing a dissertation, and I finished that spring. Because I had been thinking and percolating, so it wasn't a standing start. I had been doing a lot of research and writing. So anyway, so I did actually finish my degree, and I got a job at Harvard. So I wrote President Giamatti, and I said that I had gotten a job at Harvard, and that I would offer to head the search committee to replace the fool. His interest, but he wrote this very nice, and if you'll listen to this seems to be an acceptance of a resignation. So, okay. Dear Ms. Nelson, I am delighted to hear you have accepted an appointment at Harvard. Not only is this a distinguished appointment, but it is also an appropriate place for your talents. That I'm clever enough with this, but what this brings out in these dignitaries is just. So, you have brought to Yale a splendid, yes, that's right, that's the word. You have brought to Yale a splendid capacity for being a fool without ever being foolish, and it is time to share those gifts with institutions less endowed in the intangible resources of our common life. With best wishes, sincerely, A. Bartlett Giamatti. Well, there's Derek Block. I told a number of people about my Fools project when I went to Harvard. I had been scared at Yale, got re-scared at Harvard, but a little bit less scared. So I did tell people about this. I certainly made no overture to present myself as a candidate for Harvard Fool. I went to a retirement party. This is, I think maybe it's somewhere in my second year, And I wanted the man who was retiring was somebody who knew about the Fools Project, and I thought he would enjoy having me come as the fool to his retirement party. I did not anticipate that the president of Harvard would be here. And I had met him once or twice, but quite formally, and not dressed, same old leotard here. So I come into this party for the Neiman journalism program, and the journalism fellows, and there's a couple who done that to me, the scripts journalism fellows over there. Anyway, they saw me and they said, "Oh, we must take you over to the president. You're here to see the president." I don't know that I am here to see the president. So I just got rushed over there, and suddenly I'm there talking to the president. The conversation I will never forget with the president. He said hello, and I said hello, and then I thought, might as well go for it. I said, "I am asking you to appoint me the official Harvard fool. You can contact President Giamatti." I have a track record. And he said, all the neuroscientists tell us our memories are not precise, but this, I swear to you, this is. So I say that, he says, "I have already appointed a great many fools." And I say, "Oh, Mr. President, there is an important distinction between a closet fool and an open air fool. And I am certain you have appointed many closet fools, but I believe this is your first opportunity to appoint a fool who is out of the closet and open air." And he said, "You're right." He said, "My closets overflow with fools." So a little while passed, a year or two, and again, don't worry about reading these documents. This is just to prove that I thank the Lord I'm such a pack rat. I have all these documents. So here is my letter asking for an official appointment, May 1st, 1983. I've accepted a job at Colorado, but I'm going to stay there for one more year at Harvard, and I asked to be appointed for that final year. I sent that off, and I get incredible support. For instance, I gave a talk to the Harvard University Band, which is, at that point, was quite a silly group, quite a funny group. And so they were so excited about the idea of my candidacy that they wrote, this is a petition they wrote to President Bach asking him to appoint me official university fool. And every member of the Harvard University Band signed that. So, constituent support there, wow. So there's the Harvard University endorsement, which that was a wonderful thing to have had. And so then I send in my letter of application, and I get this letter back, and I'm going to read this because the handwriting is a little bit complicated. And you need to know, I'm sure some people in the room know it with thoroughness and bitterness, Harvard has a very cumbersome tenured appointment process. You have to, well, obviously you have to be reviewed by the department. You have to have then people from outside the university contacted who must rank you by other people at not necessarily your career stage, but just prominence in your field. Then they create what they call an ad hoc committee of distinguished people in your field, and they must come to campus and consult on your appointment. So it's very cumbersome. So this is on President's Stationery, Office of the President, Harvard University. It's obviously written in felt tip pen, handwritten, and it says, "Dear Limerick, your thoughtful proposal has finally reached me after surviving countless bureaucratic hurdles. Apparently, the only remaining problem to be surmounted is the matter of an appropriate procedure to review your proposed appointment." On this theme of what this brings out in people, well, this is an example here. "Selection of key personnel are normally made through the departments. Alas, we have no department of fools, at least none that would openly acknowledge that designation. We would also need to solicit outside letters from senior recognized fools at other leading institutions. Finally, there is the problem of an ad hoc committee, which necessitates our bringing still more fools to campus to examine the record and offer us their counsel. If you can suggest ways of satisfying these requirements, I will be most grateful." Okay, then the signature. "Sincerely, the greatest fool of all." So I get this in the mail, and I look at it, and I'm certain of my interpretation. I think somebody in the president's office intercepted my letter and wrote this as if it were from Derek Bach. the fool, that is a cheap undertaking. So I assumed he had not written that. That's a pretty funny parody of the Harvard, and the greatest fool of all. So, I mean, remember who we're talking about here. It's a dignitary. So anyway, so I received this letter, and I don't answer it because I'm not going to be tricked by, because, well, okay. So then some years pass, and I get another handwritten letter from President Bach, and I think, oh, no, it's the same handwriting. So I actually then contacted him. I said, I'm so sorry, I didn't think you could write a letter so funny. So I've been planning to leave Harvard in the summer of 1980, and in the spring of 1980, I am summoned to the president's office for an extraordinarily nice ceremony at the end of March on April Fool's Eve. I have a ceremony with President Bach, the Dean of Harvard College, Henry Rysovsky. I have this beautiful proclamation presented to me. We have champagne, we chat. It's pretty astonishing because if I had written a spectacular book, I wouldn't have had that kind of. The president wouldn't have said, "Oh, we'll have champagne, we'll have photographs, it'll be so fun." So I have that, and I just want to read you just a few excerpts from this. President and fellows of Harvard College, it says at the top, being presumably of sound mind and cheerful countenance, Patricia Limerick has applied to the president of the university for official designation as university fool. And since this request seems foolishly to fall outside the regular procedures for appointment, that is, claims no foolproof method of assessing the proposer's degree of folly, calls for no meetings of motley committees or parliaments of fools fanfarinating under the legend Veritas. Now, therefore, it seems meet to authorize the said applicant, and then there's quite a long set of wonderful powers delegated to me, including to lay claim to what fool's gold and fool's stone she can find in the old Harvard yard, to wear fool's cap when it shall suit her fancy, to observe this proud community through her revealing mirror, at all times to display the deflating common sense that is characteristic of her order, and in sum to enjoy within all of our precincts and among all our scholarly pretensions the serene, peaceful state of being a fool. Done at the Fool Hall on the eve of the Feast of Fools, the 31st day of March, 1984, sorry, my date's wrong, 1984, and bound to be undone at the first notice of the Harvard governing boards. I'm going to pass that on because I did write Derek Bott today to say that I was giving this talk, and so I do want to tell him that you broke into spontaneous. And then you applauded. You didn't even see there. Oh, we can't see it because you can possibly read it from there. Derek Bott, and then it says Praesus demens in Latin. Praesus, a Roman governor or the president, demens. Out of one's mind or senses, the Latin definition. Synonyms: mad, raving, foolish, insane, reckless. So they're the president. This is Henry Rysovsky, who was the dean of Harvard College, and he attended our pleasant ceremony. This is us at the pleasant ceremony. We're happy. You can see we're very happy there. And what was really, what a funny experience. Well, there's one that I won't take up the time, but if somebody wants to ask me, what happened after you went back to your office, Patty? But we don't, if you want to get to that, we'll do that. But otherwise, what happened here was that I had a lovely time. And you'll notice they appointed me to this position 2 months before I was going to leave town. So it's so smart. It's such a thing to do. And we're just having a lovely time. When we ended, we walked out into the hallway, and every major governing figure at Harvard was in the hallway or the waiting area waiting to come in for a meeting. So I said, wow, this is some important thing. What's going to happen here? They said, the Scotch Bowl case. We're meeting about the Scotch Bowl case. This woman is a tenured full professor at Harvard now, political scientist. She and I were both assistant professors at the same time. I have just had this delightful time hugging the president, hugging the dean, getting a lovely proclamation. Goodbye now, I'll go to Colorado, goodbye. So I'm doing that, and Theda Scotchpole had filed a grievance for gender discrimination and being turned down for tenure. So I just thought, I think I prefer my fate. I think I prefer this, but the contrast between her staying in there and finally prevailing and getting a position, a very amusing contrast. I assume I'll run into her at some point in life and we'll have a funny time there. Harvard has a lovely custom where at the last class you teach as a Harvard professor, your colleagues can come attend that and say, so here's that. Some of you may recognize Stephen Epstein, who was here for a spell. So there I am. And here I am giving my last lecture at Harvard. Okay, so now at last, here we are. I came to Colorado in 1984. Dean Everly Fleischer, Dean of Arts and Sciences, had seen some of the press coverage of the Harvard Fool, and he was in touch with me pretty soon after I got here and inquiring as to whether I would like to take that position here. So pretty soon in my time here, Dean Fleischer appointed me the Arts and Sciences Fool. Not he didn't have authority to make me the whole university fool. And this dean and I would go on tours together, and it was so merry. I mean, that's the way we were, just continuously there. We would walk into departments. Dean Fleischer would go ahead of me and would say, hello, he would walk into an office and he'd say, I am the king, and this is my fool, and we have a few questions for you. And the person there, sometimes the chairman of the department would say, well, what's going on? And Dean Fleischer would say, oh, I thought I spelled that out, but let me say that again. I'm the king, she's the fool, we have a few questions for you. So we had many, many adventures, and this started, well, I would take notes on the Fool's Tour, and then I would write up a report to Dean Fleischer, and those documents really are remarkable. I think there was genuinely rivalry between President Gee and Dean Fleischer over who owned the Fool. So pretty soon after Dean Fleischer had appointed me, President Gee came in and gave me an official university appointment. So there's the appointment there. This one, I'm not sure this one did not have a term, but when Bill McCartney was given a 16-year contract, the Fool came and asked for a 17-year contract. Which I got. But that's the one that expired several years ago, so that was a problem. But anyway, so then we had many fun times. This is me getting my appointment, and I had gone, we were in the president's office, and I had gone to sit, I just, on my own, not by any invitation, but why would a fool wait for an invitation? I went and sat in the president's chair and picked up the president's pen and started, well, it was acting as if I were there. And President Gee, who's standing behind me there, of course, is not enjoying the fact that the fool has come in and taken his chair and picked up the pen and so on. So that was, so many merry times. I wrote quite a few, we'll get to this in a moment. Very visible, this is the Chronicle of Higher, no, this is the Centerpiece alumni thing. Chronicle of Higher Education did a story on it. Well, anyway, much publicity, much coverage. And then this one moment of sad confession that the production of Folly at CU, I was supposed to give an annual report on Folly, and it just went out of my control. So some of the Fool's statements were turning into just slow it down and let me catch up. I cannot keep up with the production system here. And this certainly is true. It takes the role seriously. So this is the only classic PowerPoint slide in this presentation. Here, it's astounding. I've not looked at this stuff in years, but preparing for tonight, overwhelmed by the productivity of the Fool. I wrote Fool's reports in just basically the space of maybe a little bit more than a year on all of those topics. I did my first outing, but the first two official inspections, those were conducted with Dean Fleischer, and those are quite wonderful. One of the first broader reports was the quest to find out who is in charge at the university, and that is an extraordinary document, so fun. And sitting with us tonight is Doris Haas, who lived across the street from me. Doris Haas was my neighbor, and I had given her my house key in case I locked myself out. Sadly, when I went out on the Fool's Tour to find out who's in charge, I locked myself out of the house. So I had to go over to Doris's to get my key, and her husband Willard did not know about the Fool's Project, and so I appeared at their door asking for my house key and explaining that I had been out trying to find out who was in charge of the university. So Doris and I go back on this thing, and I think he must have let me in eventually, because how could you not eventually? He was a kind man, so he did finally just say, okay, fool, take the key. So I did that. I had a hypothesis that there was a spell of enchantment cast on Regent Hall that took thoughtful people and made them say peculiar things. And so I wrote about that. I wrote about the faculty productivity forums, which I finally in that report said, I must have made this up. Only the fool could have made these forms up on that. There was a campaign by the regents against deadwood in the faculty who were not producing. I wrote about that. I wrote about the pressures on junior faculty hoping for tenure. I wrote about the oppression, the claimed oppression of conservatives on campus. I dressed very nicely in a women's suit and clown makeup and went out to find oppressed conservatives and oppressed liberals. Some of both. And I did a report on differential teaching loads in the physics department. Should the people who are not bringing in grants and contracts, should they teach more because they are not productive in grants and contracts? I sat in a meeting on that, and so going through these documents, I thought, well, that must be kind of a boring report. That is probably the best report of all. It's so great. I mean, we should be posting. Okay, moving on, because I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for questions, and I know everyone is thinking cupcakes at this point. But I would really love to have, I don't know what, just some way on the web that people can see these reports, because they really are something. And then my most, when Abe scouted through the documents, this is one of these moments. Abe says, we're going through all these Fools files, and he's a wonderful student, but he said, this is really exciting for me. I said, oh yes, it's Fool stuff, very funny. He said, no, actually, I've never done archival research before. But it was that. And he particularly took joy in the Fool's report on committees and the proliferation of committees and what an unhappy situation that was. That report concludes with a proclamation that dissolves all committees on campus, except for 15. There would be an exception for 15 if they could make a case for why they should continue to exist. And then when I first looked at this report, I thought, what got into me on this one? Because the last part of the Fool's proclamation is that the 15 committees that are permitted to continue to exist must each of them appoint a rabbit as committee chair. On earth. But then when I read the full report, that comes out of the Fool's tour. I went on a Fool's tour. I asked people about committees. I went into a biology lab. The lab assistant had a rabbit in the lab, and I asked after the rabbit, and the lab assistant said that the rabbit served on 4 committees. So, okay. And then in the proclamation it says that this seems like a good idea because it would be very hard to speak at length, lecture, pontificate at a committee if a rabbit was in the room, and that it would also be very intense because rabbits proliferate just at the same rate as committees. So. And then this big move, in the same burst of productivity, I wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times in which it begins, what this nation desperately needs is an official fool. We have plenty, every reader is saying at this moment. The federal government is full of them. But note the distinction between fools, we've already covered this, official capitalized and closet fools, uncapitalized. Closet fools by nature present themselves as if they were something else entirely, officials, executives, managers, experts. Closet fools, every morning's newspaper proves, can do a world of damage. Damage deepened by the fact that there is only one person who can call a closet fool by his proper name, and that person is missing from the national scene. The official fool can call everything by its proper name. She can ask the improbable, essential questions that everyone else sensibly fears to ask. She can speak the unspeakable because, as medieval tradition wisely held, a kingdom without a licensed fool was a kingdom without its mechanism for discharging bad luck and circulating in its place fresh air. Wherever, however, will we find candidates? The pool is a limited one, limited to me. There may be other aspirants, but I am the only one with a track record, and then I trot out my credentials. Let us hope in this, I mean, I have to say my appreciation for this. I mean, I've forgotten all this stuff, and so it's like I'm reading it it's written by somebody else, this last paragraph in this piece. Let us hope, for the sake of the nation's health, that the president elected in 1988, whoever he or parentheses, or she, one might say, but that is a fool's hope. Let us hope that the president elected stands at the inauguration with the Chief Justice on one side leading him in the oath of office, while the fool stands on the other side, asking him what he means by it. Well, all right. Our last couple, really down today. We're not bitter by a long shot, there's no bitterness in this. This is Regent Steinhauer and me. We went on a most excellent Fools tour where one thing led to another, and the Fool ended up attending the meeting of the Colorado Commission on Higher Education, which was not in the plans. We happened, Regent Steinhauer and I walked in on the meeting, which was meeting on campus, just as the president and the chancellor went up to give their reports to the Colorado Commission on Higher Education. So we entered that room, as Mike Feely, the chair of the commission at that time, said, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And he was speaking to the president and the chancellor. But I just said, well, it's very kind of you to say that. So we had a very nice visit. And then this was my most forceful moment in 1995 when, 20 years ago, big fight, regents and president and deans all at each other, bad news in the paper regularly. So I finally put out a proclamation. It was in the Denver Post, it was in the Daily Campus, silver and gold. I addressed the proclamation to the president, to the regents, and to the loudest of the grumblers and complainers of the faculty, cut it out. With your squabbling and fighting and name-calling, you are dishonoring and discrediting a fine university. You are setting an example to youth that most of our students already considered and rejected in middle school or high school. So once again, cut it out. And a very forceful, if you want my job, you apply for it. Anyway, so there we are. And it's so fun. I mean, you can see that person, you can't see his face, but some of the conversations have been so fun, such a treat. And yet now I want to just very quickly shift to the way in which this project affected everything. It got me, the first thing in the New York Times got me over writer's block. The experience of being the person speaking in ways that were unsettling and unnerving but still necessary, that set me up to write an overview of Western American history. I truly do not think I could have written a book that had quite an impact. But still, poor students doing advanced placement tests have to compare the thought of Frederick Jackson Turner to the thought of Patricia Limerick. The word fool does not appear in the advanced placement test, I think, maybe not. So this is a headline sort of putting these two projects together. The Western history work was so energized and so unleashed by the opportunities that the Fool had. And then, of course, there's the Center of the American West. And here I am in Greeley. Greeley is very divided on the issue of fracking. We're having a forum there. I have a set of panelists that range from industry, the state director of the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, an environmental person from Western Resource Advocates, one from Gary Graham, a representative of county government, and there I am in the middle. And that role, that's what the Fool thing trained me for. Here's Reagan's former Secretary of the Interior, James Watt, and Kennedy and Johnson's former Secretary, Stuart Udall. I invited them to come together and engage in a 2-day conversation, going to the airport to pick up Jim Watt and Stuart Udall for their first, I'm not sure they ever had much of a conversation. I know they had met once or twice, but never had a conversation. Going to the airport to pick them up, you think, only a fool would have thought of this idea. It turned out to be a very interesting visit. And so there we are. There's the cheerful little figure. There's something about the notion of the telephone and the efforts of communication that suggests there. And I want to end with a couple of quotations from Enid Welsford. I had not realized until I started reading Enid Welsford that the convention, even though you cannot really hurt the Fool, a slap that can have a sting to it, that the court officials would use that. So here's Enid Welsford. But if the Fool is he who gets slapped, the most successful Fool is he who is none the worse for his slapping. The Fool is now no longer a mere safety valve for the suppressed instincts of the bully. He provides a subtle balm for the fears and wounds of those afflicted with the inferiority complex, the greater part of humanity, if we may believe our psychologists. We too are subject to the blows of fate. The fact is that the fool can count upon almost every member of his audience holding one belief, that that member of the audience himself belongs to the party of the injured innocents. Every man, therefore, is prepared to identify himself with the fool as he turns the table on his chastisers, defeats the powerful, outwits the wise, and assumes the most effective of all roles, the role of David against Goliath, the role of the pariah triumphant who can ask his so-called superiors with a grin, who then does the slapping after all? The fool is not only physically, he is morally and spiritually resilient. He is none the worse for his slapping. Often he turns the table on his slappers and inquires, what do slaps matter to me, since I can render them not only innocuous but lucrative and funny? Lucrative, no, but funny, definitely. My base pay is 0, but I've had raises that were, Everly Fleischer gave me a 200% raise on that. And then the last, and I wanted to read from Enid Wellsford, you have to learn, she's all about Latin and French, so punctum indifference, or point of rest, the neutral or impartial point, the fulcrum, the axis on which a life-preserving oscillation rests. You need to learn that term to get the full punch of this. Okay. And once more, in his capacity as a detached commentator upon the action, the fool exhibits an inner contradiction, the incongruity due to a strange twofold consciousness that makes each one of us realize that we are mere bubbles of temporary existence threatened every moment with extinction, and that we are also stable entities existing eternal and invulnerable at the very center of the flux of history, constituting a kind of punctum indifference or point of rest. Thank you. A couple of questions? Yes.
Your comment just strikes me when I'm listening to you. I noticed Derek Block's wife was known for her writing about wine.
I know.
How interesting.
That Cicilla Bach, who was actually, why was I spending so much time with Derek Bach when his wife was so much more interesting? Well, that's not more interesting, but equally interesting. Her father was Gunnar Myrdal, who wrote The American Dilemma, that really searching book on race, and it's still getting around reading it in the St. Louis area now. But Cicilla Bach is a great ethical philosopher online, and I don't know that I was ever in her company. I did lie. There's no question. We saw on public record a lie where I said I was about to finish my dissertation when there was no evidence. It turns out it was a prophetic lie because I did finish the dissertation. But just what that role playing, what she would have thought if I had had a chance to consult her. I did write in today. I hope I could have a chance to, I don't know, I hope she's still with us, I don't know. But apparently he teaches a course at the Kennedy School now and then, so I will certainly try to make up for that failure on my part. Yeah?
Can you describe the process of going on a fool's tour?
Yes. Would you like to experience the process? So when it was that incredible period of productivity, 87 to 88, I would ask myself a question like, who's in charge? And then I would put on my makeup and my colorful clothes, and I would then take a pad of paper and I would just walk the campus. Some people are very uncomfortable with the presence of the fool, so I should say there was a earlier version of the Fool's Project was in some ways more pleasant. I would wear a sign that said encouragement, any cause, or any congratulations, any achievement. And I did that at Yale, and that was great. I would run in, they're so pushing themselves and so driving themselves, so when I would wear congratulations, any occasion, I would walk up to people and say, may I be the first to congratulate you? And they would say, what for? And I would say, well, you would know better than I would. And then someone would say, well, I really don't think but I finished that paper that was just like, oh, this is great, tell me more about that paper. So that was really fun. That didn't turn into reports. But the best Fool's tours I ever took which also didn't turn into reports. But on the New Haven Green, one summer, I had two folks who joined me as volunteers. One of them was a 19-year-old college student who lived in New Haven, was going to college somewhere else, and he volunteered. The other was a young man who was Sean Willetza's nephew. Sean is a very prominent professor of history at Princeton, and Sean Willetza's nephew, who chose the clown name Skate. Skate and I and this other young man made cardboard signs that said, a panel of experts. And we toured the green at festivals, and we would go up to people, and we had listed topics. And Skate had arithmetic, and very spelling out, and astronomy, I think astronomy. So we would walk up to people and say, hello, we are a panel of experts. And there was something that just struck everyone as so funny that we were fools and claiming to be experts at the same time. And it just powered that occasion. So we met all kinds of people. Skate was very witty. I mean, I think he might have been 9 or 10, but he took every question and just said the funniest and cleverest things. And the other fellow and I just tagged along behind Skate, but that was really cool. So the panel of experts thing should get revived. But anyway, a Fool's report Fool's Tour that's gonna have a report. Who's in charge of the university? Okay, so and as soon as you start, you don't even need the makeup, you think, I don't really know this. So you're really asking quite sincerely. So I ran into one of the report leads with a story. I came up to a fellow who was probably a student who was working in parking management. And I said to him, hello, could you tell me who's in charge of the university? And he said, I don't know what you mean. I said, well, who is your leader? He said, I don't have leaders, I just have bosses. So you got it, and you write that down, and then you just keep walking around, and then so it's sort of a prophetic moment for me at the center. I ran into a bunch of people, humanities professors. When I said, who's in charge of the university, they said, the scientists and the engineer, because they're in charge. You should go to the science and engineering. So I went over there, and that's like when I first started to get that the science and engineers do seem to have more money, but they work like fiends writing grant proposals, and so I really couldn't end up thinking of the science and engineering departments as I did before the Fool's Tour. Anyway, so I wrote down, people said that the football team was in charge, people said all kinds of interesting things, and so I wrote a really nice report about who was in charge, but it comes out of the interactions. I mean, I obviously would never have thought of the genius of appointing a rabbit to chair an academic committee, but once I met that rabbit, and the last person told me about the rabbit's resume, I thought, oh, okay. So it's a wonderful back and forth thing, but really, really fun. Yeah.
I feel like it can be hard to take the role that you take and not make any enemies while you're doing it.
Would it be hard to do?
I feel like it is hard to do that. And I feel like walking that line, I'm wondering if you could talk about the difference between the mentality of the fool and your accoutrements of the fool, and which one of those is more important, or if you need both.
The accoutrements being?
The makeup and the hat.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, I think that the smugness and arrogance stance is the best way to make enemies. If you really want to go out in the world and get people's backs up. The accoutrements of the pompous expert, that gets backs up. So looking like a really peculiar, I mean, I can't, try pomposity, and it's really difficult. So that eases things right away, because I guess I would say that for people who are genuinely thinking that this is not the right thing for a person to do, I mean, they get to feel very superior to me. They get to think, well, I may or may not have succeeded at this or that, but I would never go out looking like an idiot like that. So you get them with them feeling that the confidence and power is on their side. So it seems like it actually neutralizes a lot of what would be there that can get the prickliness going. And then the main thing about why it's not, when President Giamatti wrote me, I asked President Giamatti to appoint me emeritus fool at Yale, excuse me, or was at Yale, and he said that he couldn't do that because I had never held the position there, and I thought, you accepted my resignation. If you run a business and somebody you've never heard of writes a letter resigning for your business, do you write a nice letter thanking them for their good work? So there's something, he was a brilliant man, but I think he didn't think that through. But the sign-off line was, he said, best wishes on your apparently foolproof career. And so that to me was very interesting, because I have confessed to you that I was scared when I started. But what I did not know, and what I got to see 1,000 times, is if you really make someone mad, and they really don't like what you have said, and they don't like you, they had better sit on that, because they are going to sound idiotic. If they say, there was one administrator, it was very vague, 20 years ago, an administrator who said at a meeting, that many people reported to me, I'm going to get that fool. Well, now, for heaven's sake. How is that your agenda? Is that, well, that would explain some of the troubles we've been having. That's your agenda. So the notion that you are going to get the fool, just keep it to yourself, because it's so silly. You just look like such a comic parody of yourself at that. So I think that's been the thing. So I can say, there was one, I believe the only time, and I tend to have a cheerful personality, so I may not remember as many of these occasions, but I only remember one occasion of direct threat, though it was so funny. Okay. So I loved Harvard. I was clearly not going to get tenure at Harvard, so I accepted this job. And I decided I had just written to President Bach, and I decided I really like Scott Simon and Noah Adams at NPR. So I decided I would have the Boston Globe wanted to do a story about my being the Harvard fool. So I let them do that because I knew that it would get a call from NPR and that I would get interviewed, ideally by Noah Adams. And it all works except that Susan Stamberg calls me. I mean, that was fine, it was wonderful. But, so I went, the Harvard history department had a long phase where the professors didn't go to the department meetings, and so they started a nice custom of having drinks and dinner before the meeting. So it was very nice because the assistant professors didn't have to pay for the dinner, and because we were kind of microorganisms, we didn't stay through the evening. As soon as something important came up, we had to leave. So we got drinks and dinner and socializing and maybe one or two tiny items of business, and then we got to leave. So that was a wonderful custom. And I was at that dinner, and I said to a group of senior professors, well, the Boston Globe is doing a story on me as the official Harvard fool, and I'm hoping, and the one man, I won't say his name, he's a very prominent historian. He said, Boston Globe is doing a story on what? I said, well, at Yale, I was the official fool. And that was in the New York Times. And this man had been one of the people who had hired me. And he just looked so shocked. And he said, you want to be known as a fool? And the Globe is going to, and I said, wait, and I've done that before. And he said, Patricia, if we had known you were a fool, we would never have hired you. Well, this man was kind of known as a small F fool in some circles, so it was just sort of I was leaving, it didn't matter, but it was just such a funny moment. But that's the closest we ever got to actual threat, and the horse was out of barn. I mean, it was different. Okay, so maybe, yeah. Yes.
Stephen King seems to have vaguely damaged the image of clowns. For you as a fool, are you often forced into differentiating yourself from clowns?
Yes, and the bozo thing is sort of the stand-in for that. I had a wonderful friend whose brother went to Ringling Brothers and was very funny. He went through the school and he was just wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. So I do not in any way want to say that clowns, I mean, especially the ones who go to children's hospitals and so on, I love that. But it's just totally different. It would be like, well, I can see a couple of physicians from where I'm standing here. I mean, it would be like going to a doctor's office to have a tooth pulled or something, or to have a filling put in. The doctor would have a kind of, well, why are you here to get a filling? That's not what, there's a place you can go for that, but this is not it. So get out. I mean, I don't know if the doctor says that. I could look at a few of them and see if that. But it's just, it's a different role. It's just a completely different role. So I don't know what, if I'm mistaken for a clown, it's just, you just have to clear that up fast. Because it's mistaken identity. And I am a disappointment to groups of children. I can do one or two children at a time, and especially ones who like funny words and so on. But if you put me in front of, I think it was at Harvard, they had me sort of be the MC for the holiday party, and what a calamity! Everyone got out of control. They're whooping, they're knocking over the tree. It was just, and the fool can't say stop knocking over the tree because he pays attention. That just stirs the children up all the more. So a clown, I think, could have managed that much better than I. And it's just important for people to know which is which. So absolutely, very important to make that distinction. So maybe obvious one must be. Yeah.
Why choose the title of fool as opposed to jester?
Because a jester is too safe. I mean, if the president of Yale says I'm both president and jester, you know the term jester is too safe. So, because a jester can be a maker of jest, a witty person. A fool gets the whole package, the power of making jest, the power of speaking openly, and the negative part, that if somebody, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, there's one other memory here, flooding back a little bit. A graduate student at Yale who's quite an accomplished post-colonial, anti-imperialist historian now, Amy Stanley? Sorry, anyway, I went to some social gathering, no, it was a lunch at Calvin College at Yale in clown makeup, and this poor woman just was shaken. She just kept saying, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And well, you see, in Shakespeare, I don't know if you had a chance, I mean, King Lear is sort of an interesting play, and so I'm just trying to say what I'm doing, and she just kept saying, why would you want to be a fool? And if I'd just come without makeup and I'd said, oh, I'm going to make more jokes, or I'm going to be a jester, I don't think I would have gotten that. But it is taking on the pejorative parts of that. You can't say, only see me in the delightful, positive, merry way. If somebody really has, well, this gets to a really interesting thing that when gay and lesbian people were outing public officials who were gay and lesbian but not admitting to that, and sometimes supporting policies that were counter to the interests of gay and lesbian people, gay and lesbian activists took to outing a congressman who was gay or lesbian and who was not admitting that and who was acting in ways that were not supportive of the community. So I had one phase where I think I told a reporter that I was thinking of outing closet fools. And I said that you could tell a closet fool, I could sense it instantly, because those were the people who were uncomfortable with me. If a person, I mean, Derek Bach never flinched. Derek Bach was Henry Risowski at Fleischer. They just said, oh, hi, I'm the king, this is the fool. Perfectly confident with that. But a closet fool wants me out of there. So that was in the paper one day before the Fools Tour, I think. It said that I might be outing closet fools and that I could tell the difference because people who were uncomfortable in my company, that was my best hint, that there was a closet fool there. So that Fools Tour, everyone's just, hi, I'm so glad you're here. But it just has to have, the gesture is too comfortable and doesn't involve the sharp edge of being taken to be a real fool. That's, I guess, the point, is that you might be taken to be a real fool, and guess what? That's probably what you are. So, yeah.
I was interested in in what face paint does for you, both in separating yourself from normal, polite society, and also as a mask that might be liberating in saying what you need to say.
Yeah, so this comment is, what does the face paint do in separating myself? Well, it's just a, oh my gosh, it's such a crossing of a bridge. It's the Rubicon, because once you have gone out with this, you can't say, I've kind of had a change of heart, I think I'll just go merge into the crowd. And that's what made the meeting of the Colorado Commission on Higher Education, and which turned into a joint meeting with the regents. I was there in full regalia, and I was invited to lunch. And I was sitting there with all these officials, and I was on the far corner of the room, and I couldn't get out. And they actually started to have a real direct discussion about issues that I should not have been there for. But I mean, I just thought, if I stand up, I will call attention to myself. But that was a moment where I just thought, oh, for an eraser button that just, oh, excuse me, but it was such an interesting, oh man, but you make your choice, and once you made your choice, you, as Hunter Thompson used to say, buy the ticket, take the ride. So then, in terms of the impact, it always used to be, I was always too busy to take a fool's tour. The second I started putting on the white face, it just was comical that I had been too busy, and that things that I was thinking, oh no, I have to do my faculty the reports for productivity. I just think, and that was a big deal, was it? And tonight, with my excellent coworkers at the Senate, by the way, thanks all coworkers at the Senate for helping with this, but I actually had two great comrades putting on the makeup, and when the first time they showed the image, I thought, that's the sensation. It's just such a, there may be pharmaceuticals that can deliver that, but they affect your kidneys. So I think what I would like to do is show you one last image, this hat, and just conclude with this. There's a Navajo photographer named Will Wilson, and he has studied the work of Edward Curtis, who did all the Vanishing Indian kinds of images. And so Will Wilson has worked and worked and worked. He does the wet plate photography. The only thing he does that's different from Curtis is he uses a flash, so you don't have to sit frozen for so long. So it's so interesting that this very remarkable man, who I think will be here in the fall for a presentation, this Indian man has gone further into the mind of Edward Curtis and what you have to be thinking as you're taking Curtis-like photographs. So he started a project where he took photographs of contemporary Indian people and musicians and bankers and reporters and so on. But he took them with the photographs, images with the Curtis technique. And so they looked like 19th century vanishing Indians. The Curtis technique does that to people. So then he started to expand the project, and he came to the Denver Art Museum a couple years ago, and he had some non-Indian people who were involved with Indian issues were invited to come have our images taken too. His custom is, he says, you can bring a cultural object that matters to you to be in the photograph with you. Provenance can get miraculous. The date that worked for me and Will Wilson was April 1st. So Will Wilson took this photograph of me in this cultural object that matters to me. And you have, the Curtis technique does turn into melancholy. It does turn into that. It's a little bit haunting in that thing I was reading from Edith Wellsford about the point of rest, that you're aware of your mortality and you're at that point of rest, that Curtis photograph does convey that. But then, okay, so he takes the photograph, then he's in there developing the wet plate thing, and my skin is getting darker and darker. And I'd always wondered, I just thought, what happened in the 19th century? How come the Curtis people have such dark skin? Well, it does, the Curtis technique is what does that. So as I say, oh, my skin's getting darker and darker, he says, yes. Bill Wilson says, and I think I want to just end on this great line, he says, I'm indigenizing North America one person at a time.